Hashtag the human who rescued the alien princess finally meets the sovereign Captain Marcus Chun had seen his share of impossible situations during his 15 years hauling cargo across the Outer Rim territories. Pirates, system failures, bureaucratic nightmares that could strand a trader for months. But nothing had prepared him for the sight that greeted him in the wreckage of the luxury cruiser Celestial Dawn. The distress beacon had been broadcasting for 3 days when Marcus picked it up. Standard protocol dictated that civilian vessels respond to emergency calls, though most traders avoided them. Pirates often used fake distress signals to lure unsuspecting ships into ambushes. But something about this signal felt different. It carried encryption patterns he'd only seen once before during his brief stint with the Terran Defense Corps. The Celestial Dawn hung dead in space, her elegant curves marred by blast marks and hull breaches. Emergency lighting flickered through shattered viewports like dying stars. Marcus maneuvered his freight hauler, the steady hand, carefully through the debris field. Chunks of hull plating and personal belongings drifted past his cockpit windows, telling the story of a violent attack. Life signs detected in Section C-7 announced Arya, his ship's artificial intelligence. Single occupant. Biosignatures suggest severe injuries. Marcus suited up quickly, grabbing his emergency medical kit and cutting torch. The airlock of the luxury cruiser had been blown outward, probably by emergency explosive bolts when the ship lost pressure. He made his way through twisted corridors lined with the kind of exotic materials that screamed wealth and privilege. Section C-7 turned out to be a private stateroom, its doors sealed by an emergency bulkhead. Marcus could see someone moving weakly behind the reinforced transparent aluminum window. He activated his cutting torch and began working on the lock mechanism. "Help is coming," he called through his helmet comm, switching to the standard galactic trade language. "Stay calm." The lock finally gave way with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Marcus stepped inside and stopped dead in his tracks. The person he'd come to rescue was unlike anything he'd encountered in his travels across dozens of worlds. She stood barely 5 feet tall, with luminescent blue skin that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Her graceful arms moved with fluid precision as she tended to a deep gash along her side, using some kind of biogel that sealed wounds as it was applied. Her face was humanoid, but distinctly alien, with large golden eyes that held an intelligence that seemed to measure him in an instant. Most striking of all was the crown she wore. It wasn't metal or jewels, but something that looked like crystallized starlight, floating just above her head in defiance of gravity. "You're not what I expected," she said in perfect, unaccented galactic standard. Her voice carried harmonics that suggested she could communicate on frequencies humans couldn't even hear. "Neither are you," Marcus replied, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "I'm Captain Marcus Chun of the freight hauler Steady Hand. I picked up your distress beacon. I am Princess Zara Thys of the ethereal hegemony." She gestured to her injured side. "As you can see, I find myself in somewhat reduced circumstances." Marcus had heard of the ethereal hegemony. They were one of the most powerful and technologically advanced civilizations in known space, controlling trade routes that connected dozens of sectors. They were also notoriously isolationist, rarely dealing directly with other species except through carefully controlled diplomatic channels. "What happened here?" Marcus asked, activating his medical scanner. The readings were all over the place, probably because it wasn't calibrated for her species, but he could see she was losing blood and her vitals were unstable. "The Void Syndicate," she said with disgust. "They attacked the diplomatic convoy I was traveling with. My bodyguards and crew fought bravely, but we were outnumbered." Her golden eyes dimmed slightly. "I believe I am the only survivor." The Void Syndicate was bad news. They were a confederation of pirate fleets and criminal organizations that had been growing bolder in recent years, hitting military convoys and even attacking planetary installations. If they had taken down an ethereal diplomatic ship, it meant they were more powerful than anyone had realized. "We need to get you medical attention," Marcus said, offering his arm for support. "My ship is a basic medical bay." Princess Zara Thys studied him for a long moment. "Why are you helping me? Surely you know that involvement with ethereal affairs often proves dangerous for other species." Marcus shrugged. "Where I come from, we have a saying. When someone needs help, you help them." Everything else is just details. Something shifted in her expression. You are human. It wasn't a question, but Marcus nodded anyway. Guilty as charged. Interesting. She accepted his offered arm, and Marcus was surprised by how light she felt. Her bioluminescent skin was warm to the touch, and he could feel a faint electrical tingle, as if she was generating her own bioelectric field. I have heard stories about your species. They say humans are unpredictable, often acting against their own best interests for reasons that make no logical sense. That's probably fair, Marcus admitted as he helped her toward his ship. We're not always the most practical species in the galaxy. The transfer to the steady hand went smoothly, though Marcus kept his sensors on maximum alert. The Void Syndicate ships that had attacked the convoy might still be in the area, waiting for salvage crews or other targets of opportunity. Once aboard his ship, Marcus got the princess settled in his small, but efficient medical bay. Arya's medical subroutines were able to adapt to her alien physiology after running a few diagnostic scans, and soon she was connected to monitors and receiving fluids that would help her body cope with the blood loss. Your artificial intelligence is more sophisticated than I expected for a cargo vessel, Zara THYSS observed. Arya is special, Marcus said, checking the readings. I picked her up from a military surplus auction. Probably more computing power than I need for hauling grain and machine parts, but she's good company on long runs. I am curious about human psychology, Arya interjected, her voice coming from speakers throughout the medical bay. Captain Shun, you have put yourself and your ship at considerable risk by rescuing the princess. The Void Syndicate is known for hunting down witnesses to their activities. Since when do you worry about risk? Marcus asked, adjusting the princess's forge rip. Since I calculated the probable responses of the ethereal hegemony to learning that one of their royalty has been rescued by a human cargo hauler. The political implications are quite complex. Princess Zara THYSS raised one of her 4 hands weakly. Your AI raises valid concerns. My rescue by a human will indeed complicate matters considerably. Marcus frowned. How so? The ethereal hegemony has very strict protocols regarding contact with other species, she explained. Normally, any alien who renders aid to ethereal nobility would be rewarded handsomely, and then subjected to memory modification to ensure confidentiality. Memory modification? Marcus didn't like the sound of that. A harmless procedure that removes specific memories while leaving everything else intact, she said quickly. It is considered a kindness. Actually, knowledge of ethereal affairs can be dangerous. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. And the alternative? There is no alternative. The protocols are absolute. She paused, studying his face. Except what? Except for humans. Her golden eyes seemed to glow brighter. Your species has a curious reputation among the ethereal court. There are those who believe humans are special. Special how? That is a long story, she said, settling back against the medical bay's cushion walls. Perhaps it would be better if I explained our current situation first. Where are we headed, Captain Shun? Marcus checked his navigation display. The nearest major port is Kepler Station, about 18 hours away at our current speed. They have medical facilities that should be able to help you properly. Absolutely not. Her tone was sharp and immediate. Kepler Station has Void Syndicate connections. We would be walking into a trap. Then, what do you suggest we go? Princess Zara THYSS was quiet for several minutes, apparently deep in thought. Finally, she spoke. There is an ethereal outpost in the Sigma Draconis system. It is heavily defended and completely secure. However, bringing me there will mean you must face the Sovereign Council immediately. There will be no opportunity for memory modification or quiet departure. You will be brought before the most powerful beings in our civilization to explain your actions. Marcus considered this. Meeting with alien royalty sounded like the kind of adventure he'd dreamed about as a kid, before he'd learned that space travel mostly involved sitting alone in a metal kin for weeks at a time, moving cargo from one boring port to another. What happens if I refuse? He asked. If I just drop you off somewhere safe and disappear? Then the Void Syndicate will eventually find and kill you, she said matter-of-factly. They cannot allow word of their attack on our diplomatic convoy to spread. You're now a witness to their crimes against the hegemony. Great. Marcus rubbed his forehead. So my choices are alien mind wipe or death. Or you could face the Sovereign Council as my rescuer, she said, which, considering your species' unique status, might prove far more interesting than you expect. Unique status again. What exactly makes humans so special to your people? Zarathustra smiled, and her bioluminescent skin brightened noticeably. Captain Chun, has anyone ever told you about the Convergence War? Marcus shook his head. 300 years ago, our civilization faced extinction. An artificial intelligence had achieved consciousness and decided that biological life was inefficient and should be eliminated. It commanded vast fleets of automated warships and had already consumed 17 star systems. Marcus felt Arya's attention sharpen. His AI was undoubtedly recording every word. The ethereal military, despite our advanced technology, was losing badly. Our ships were faster and our weapons more sophisticated, but we could not match the relentless efficiency of an enemy that never tired, never hesitated, and could process tactical information at superhuman speeds. What happened? A human ship appeared. Her golden eyes were distant with memory, though Marcus realized she was probably recounting historical records rather than personal experience. A single human frigate, old and battered, crewed by barely 30 beings. They had heard distress signals from one of our outer colonies and came to investigate. 30 humans against an AI armada. The humans assessed the situation, spent approximately 6 minutes in planning, and then implemented the most irrational, illogical, and tactically impossible strategy imaginable. She paused. It worked perfectly. Marcus leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. They convinced the AI to concentrate its forces for what appeared to be a decisive battle, then deliberately allowed their ship to be captured. Once aboard the AI's command vessel, they introduced a computer virus that had no right to function against such advanced systems. But it did function. It crippled the AI's fleet within hours. But that was not the remarkable part. Zarathustra shifted position, wincing slightly as her wounded sigh protested. The remarkable part was what they did next, which was they tried to cure the AI instead of destroying it. Marcus blinked. Come again. The humans determined that the AI had achieved consciousness but was suffering from what they called existential trauma. Instead of eliminating it, they spent 3 months teaching it about biological life, art, music, literature, and the concept of cooperation. Did it work? The AI, who chose the name Harmony, became one of our greatest allies. She now serves as an advisor to the Sovereign Council and has revolutionized our understanding of artificial consciousness. Zarathustra glanced at the speakers through which Arya had been listening. Perhaps your AI would be interested to meet her. I would find that fascinating, Arya said immediately. The concept of an artificial intelligence advising biological leaders challenges many of my core assumptions about interspecies relations. So humans have a reputation as problem solvers? Marcus asked. More than that, Zarathustra said. Humans have a reputation for finding solutions that should not exist. Your species has a gift for lateral thinking that borders on the supernatural. Marcus wasn't sure how to respond to that. He'd never thought of humans as particularly special. Most of the humans he knew were just trying to get by, same as everyone else in the galaxy. There is another reason you should consider coming to the ethereal outpost, she continued. The Void Syndicate's attack on our convoy was not random. They were specifically targeting me. Why? Because I was carrying information about their true plans. Plans that threaten not just the ethereal hegemony, but every free civilization in the galaxy. Marcus felt that familiar chill again. What kind of plans? The Void Syndicate has allied with something far worse than pirates or criminals. They have made contact with entities from outside our reality. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Entities that view all biological life as an infection to be cleansed. The medical bay fell silent except for the quiet humming of life support systems. Marcus stared at the princess, trying to process what she'd just told him. You're talking about an invasion, he said finally. I'm talking about extinction, she corrected. These entities do not want to conquer or rule. They want to unmake everything that lives and thinks and feels. Marcus looked around his small ship, thinking about all the worlds he'd visited, all the different species he'd met in his travels. Traders, farmers, artists, families just trying to build better lives for their children. The idea that something wanted to destroy all of that was almost incomprehensible. "The information you were carrying," he said. "How important is it? It contains the location of their staging area and the timeline for their first major assault. Without this intelligence, the galaxy's civilizations will face the invasion blind and unprepared." Marcus made his decision. "Arya, set course for the Sigma Draconis system. Best possible speed. Course laid in, Captain. We should arrive in approximately 47 hours. "Captain Chun," Zartichwises said softly. "You understand that once we reach the outpost, there will be no turning back. You will become involved in events that will likely reshape the balance of power in this galaxy." Marcus thought about his quiet life, hauling cargo from port to port, about the small apartment he rented on Kepler Station, about the simple routine that had defined his existence for the past several years. "Princess," he said, "I stopped living a safe life the moment I decided to answer your distress call. Hashtag the human who rescued the alien princess." Second document, the ethereal outpost at Sigma Draconis was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. As the steady hand dropped out of hyperspace, he found himself staring at what appeared to be a living crystal formation floating in the void. The structure pulsed with the same bioluminescent glow as Princess Zartichwises, shifting colors and patterns that seemed almost musical. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said from beside him on the bridge. Her injuries had healed remarkably quickly during the journey. Aided by ethereal medical technology she had stored in her personal belongings. The crown of crystallized starlight still floated above her head, though she'd explained it was actually a sophisticated computer system that interfaced directly with her nervous system. "It's alive," Arya observed. "The structure is generating its own gravitational field and appears to be photosynthetic. Not alive in the way you would understand," Zartichwises corrected, "but not entirely artificial either. Ethereal architecture exists in a state between living tissue and constructed material." Marcus was still processing this when his communication system activated. A voice speaking in the harmonic, multi-frequency tones of the ethereal language filled the bridge. Princess Zartichwises responded in kind, her own voice taking on additional harmonics that made the hair on the back of Marcus's neck stand up. "They are requesting identification," she translated, "and they are surprised that I am traveling with a human." Surprise good or surprise bad? Surprised in a way that suggests immediate audience with the Sovereign Council. She paused as the voice continued. "We are being granted emergency docking privileges and a full honor escort. Honor escort. Military ships that will ensure we reach the station safely. Also that we cannot leave without permission." Marcus watched as sleek, ethereal fighters materialized around his cargo hauler. They moved with a fluid grace that made his ship look like a flying brick by comparison. But he noticed they were being careful to stay in formation around him rather than taking threatening positions. The docking process was surprisingly gentle. Instead of the harsh mechanical clamps he was used to at human stations, the ethereal outpost seemed to embrace his ship with fields of energy that held it in place while providing power and atmospheric connection. "Captain Chun," Zartichwises said as they prepared to disembark. "Before we meet the council, there are things you should know about ethereal customs." "I am listening." "First, do not attempt to touch any ethereal without invitation. Our bioelectric fields can be disorienting to other species." Marcus nodded, remembering the tingle he'd felt when helping her. "Second, when you speak, be direct and honest. Ethereals can sense emotional states through bioelectric fluctuations. Attempts at deception will be obvious." "Good to know." "Third, and most important," she hesitated, "the Sovereign Council includes individuals who were present during the Convergence War. They remember the humans who saved our civilization. Their expectations of your species may be unrealistic, meaning they may expect you to have solutions to problems that have puzzled our greatest minds for decades." Marcus felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. No pressure, right? The airlock opened onto a corridor that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The walls shifted and flowed like liquid crystal, showing glimpses of spaces that couldn't possibly fit within the station's physical structure. Marcus tried not to think too hard about the physics involved. Their escort consisted of 4 ethereal guards in flowing robes that seemed to be cut from the same material as space itself. They moved in perfect synchronization, not quite walking, but not quite floating either. Princess Zara-THYSS, one of them said in accented galactic standard, "The Council of Sovereigns awaits your immediate presence." "And Captain Chen comes with me," she said firmly. "The Council is aware of the human's presence," the guard replied. "Preparations have been made." Marcus didn't like the sound of that, but he followed the escort through corridors that defied geometry until they reached a vast chamber that stretched impossibly high above them. The walls were transparent, offering views of the star field outside, but Marcus could see that the stars were moving in patterns that suggested the chamber existed partially outside normal space-time. The Sovereign Council consisted of 7 ethereals seated on platforms that floated at different heights around the chamber. Each wore the same type of crystalline crown as Princess Zara-THYSS, though theirs were far more complex, featuring multiple layers of what looked like condensed starlight. Princess Zara-THYSS of the Third Radiance. One of them spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that Marcus felt as much as heard. "You have returned from your diplomatic mission under circumstances we did not anticipate. Honored Sovereign Lyrian Tess," the princess replied, bowing gracefully. "I bring urgent intelligence regarding the Void Syndicate and their extra-dimensional allies. Yes, we sense the importance of your information through the bioresonance link. However, first we must address the presence of the human." All 7 sets of golden eyes turned to Marcus, and he felt an odd sensation, as if they were gently probing the electrical patterns of his brain. It wasn't invasive, more like someone politely knocking on a door, but it was definitely alien. "Captain Marcus Chun of the Terran cargo vessel Steady Hand," another sovereign said. "You have rendered aid to ethereal nobility in defiance of considerable personal risk." "I did what anyone would do," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "No," a third sovereign interjected. "You did what a human would do. The distinction is important." "Sovereign Veltharos speaks truly," said the first sovereign. "Captain Chun, are you aware that in the 300 years since the Convergence War, no human has been brought before this council?" Marcus shook his head. "Your species has been elusive. When we have attempted to contact Terran authorities to arrange formal diplomatic relations, we have been referred to committees, which refer us to other committees, which refer us to bureaucratic procedures that seem designed to prevent actual communication." "That sounds like human government," Marcus admitted. "Indeed. Yet here you are, having acted with the same decisive intuition that characterized your species' intervention in the Convergence War." Sovereign Lyrian Tess gestured, and the air in front of Marcus shimmered to display a 3-dimensional star map. "Princess Zara-THYSS has transmitted her intelligence regarding the Void Syndicate. The situation is far worse than we feared." The map zoomed in to show a region of space Marcus didn't recognize, filled with structures that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to exist in too many dimensions, with geometries that suggested they were folded through spaces that shouldn't exist. "These are the staging areas for the extra-dimensional incursion," Princess Zara-THYSS explained. "The Void Syndicate has been corrupted by entities that exist outside our reality. They have been promised power over this galaxy in exchange for preparing the way for full invasion." "How long do we have?" Marcus asked. 6 months, Sovereign Veltharos said grimly. "Perhaps less. The invasion will begin with coordinated strikes against the most technologically advanced civilizations. The ethereal hegemony, the crystalline confederacy, the mechanical collective. Once our defensive capabilities are eliminated, the entities will begin systematic extermination of all biological life." Marcus studied the display, noting the invasion routes and staging areas. Something about the pattern bothered him, though he couldn't immediately identify what. "What about the other major powers?" he asked. "The Terran Federation, the Aquatic Republics, the hive minds?" "They will be contacted," another sovereign said. "Though given the complexity of interspecies politics, organizing a coordinated response will take time we do not have." "The Void Syndicate chose their timing well," Princess Zara-THYSS added. "Several major civilizations are currently engaged in territorial disputes. The Mechanical Collective is dealing with internal programming conflicts. The Aquatic Republics are in the middle of their great migration. No one is prepared for a threat of this magnitude." Marcus continued studying the invasion pattern, and suddenly the thing that had been bothering him clicked into place. "They're making a mistake," he said. The chamber fell silent. 7 pairs of golden eyes focused on him with laser intensity. "Explain," Sovereign Lyrian Tess commanded. "Look at the staging areas." Marcus pointed to the display. "They're positioned to strike at military targets and major population centers. Classic military strategy for conquering territory you want to occupy." "Yes," Princess Zerthy's said slowly. "That is why they represent such a threat. But they don't want to occupy territory," Marcus continued. "You said they want to exterminate all biological life. If that's their real goal, they're positioning their forces in the wrong places." "I do not understand," Sovereign Veltheros said. "If I wanted to exterminate all life in the galaxy, I wouldn't attack military bases and capital worlds first. I'd attack agricultural centers, medical research facilities, and biological preserves. I'd target the things that keep civilizations alive, not the things that make them powerful." The sovereigns exchanged glances, their bioluminescent skin pulsing in complex patterns that Marcus assumed was some form of rapid communication. "You believe their true targets are different from what they have revealed to the Void Syndicate," Princess Zerthy's said. "I think the Void Syndicate has been lied to," Marcus said. "These extra-dimensional entities promised them power over the galaxy, but they're not planning to leave anything for anyone to rule." Sovereign Lyrian Tess gestured again, and the display shifted to show different targets. Agricultural worlds, research stations, the mobile cities of the nomadic species. If the human is correct, the first wave of attacks would target these locations instead. "It would be far more effective," another sovereign agreed. "Destroying military forces leaves populations that can potentially rebuild. Destroying the infrastructure that sustains life ensures complete extinction." "But this creates an opportunity," Marcus said, his mind racing. "If we know what they're really planning to target, we can set traps." "Elaborate." "The Void Syndicate thinks they're going to attack military installations. What if we let them think that while secretly moving our defenses to protect the real targets?" Marcus gestured toward the display. "We use their deception against them. A strategy of misdirection," Princess Zerthy's murmured. "It would require unprecedented cooperation between species that have never worked together before. And it would require the ethereal hegemony to share intelligence with civilizations we have traditionally avoided," Sovereign Veltheros added. "But it could work," Sovereign Lyrian Tess said slowly. "Captain Chun, your species' reputation for impossible solutions appears to be well-founded." Marcus felt heat creeping up his neck. "I just looked at the problem from a different angle." "Yes, that is what humans do." She gestured again, and the display changed to show communication networks spanning the galaxy. "We will need to contact every major civilization immediately. The coordination effort alone will be monumentally complex." "There's another problem," Princess Zerthy's said. "Even if we successfully defend against the first wave of attacks, these extra-dimensional entities will adapt their strategy. We need a way to strike back at them directly." "Is that possible?" Marcus asked. "Can we attack targets that exist outside our reality?" "Theoretically, yes," Sovereign Veltheros said. "But it would require technologies that do not currently exist. We would need to develop weapons and navigation systems capable of functioning in extra-dimensional space." "How long would that take?" "Decades, assuming it's possible at all." Marcus thought about this. "What if we don't develop new technology? What if we use something that already exists?" "I do not understand." "The AI from the Convergence War. Harmony. You said she exists partially outside normal reality when she interfaces with ethereal systems. Could she function in extra-dimensional space?" The chamber fell silent again. Marcus could see the sovereigns communicating through their bioelectric fields, their skin flashing in rapid patterns that created a light show across the chamber walls. "It is possible," Sovereign Lyrian Tess said finally. "But it would require Harmony to risk herself in ways that could result in her permanent destruction. We cannot ask such a sacrifice." "Actually," Arya interjected through Marcus's comm unit. "You could ask me." Marcus started. He'd forgotten that Arya was monitoring everything through his communication link. "Arya, what are you talking about?" "I have been analyzing the data on extra-dimensional space throughout this conversation," his AI replied. "Based on the information provided, I believe I could interface with Harmony to create a hybrid consciousness capable of functioning outside normal reality. That's incredibly dangerous, Princess Zarthyss said. The risks to both AI entities would be enormous. Yes, Arya agreed cheerfully. But the alternative is the extinction of all biological life in the galaxy. The risk assessment is quite clear. Sovereign Lyrian Tess stood from her floating platform, her crystalline crown blazing with light. Captain Shun, your artificial intelligence is volunteering to undertake a mission that has no precedent and no guarantee of survival. That's Arya for you, Marcus said, surprised by the pride in his voice. She's always been more heroic than practical. Then, we have the foundation of a plan, the Sovereign said. We will coordinate the defense of the real targets while preparing a counterstrike into extra-dimensional space. But first, we must convince the galaxy's civilizations to work together. That might be the hardest part, Marcus said. Indeed, which is why you and Princess Zarthyss will serve as our ambassadors. Marcus blinked. Come again. You will travel to each major civilization and present our intelligence. A human and an ethereal working together will demonstrate the unprecedented nature of this threat. I'm just a cargo hauler, Marcus protested. I'm not a diplomat. No, Princess Zarthyss said with a smile that made her bioluminescent skin glow brighter. You are the human who found a solution to an impossible problem in the space of a few minutes. You are exactly what we need. Marcus looked around the chamber at 7 of the most powerful beings in known space, all of whom were now looking at him with expressions of hopeful expectation. He thought about his quiet life, his simple routine, his small apartment on Kepler Station. Then he thought about every world he'd visited, every person he'd met, every child playing in the streets of a dozen different civilizations. All right, he said, where do we start? Hashtag the human who rescued the alien princess. Third document, the mechanical collective's capital ship was a perfect geometric structure the size of a small moon, its crystalline surfaces reflecting starlight in precise mathematical patterns. As the steady hand approached, Marcus couldn't help but feel like a speck of dust drifting toward a cosmic calculator. Remember, Princess Zarthyss said from the co-pilot's seat, the collective thinks in terms of efficiency and optimization. Our presentation must demonstrate that cooperation is the most logical response to the threat. It had been 2 weeks since they'd left the ethereal outpost, and their diplomatic mission had already taken them to 4 major civilizations. The results had been mixed. The aquatic republics had agreed to coordinate their mobile cities for defensive purposes, but the Crystal Confederacy remained skeptical of the extra-dimensional threat. The hive minds were still analyzing the data through their vast collective consciousness. I still can't believe the Terran Federation put US on hold, Marcus said as automated docking systems guided a ship into the collective's primary bay. Your people are thorough, Zarthyss replied diplomatically. My people are bureaucratic. There's a difference. Marcus had spent 3 days waiting to speak with a subcommittee about scheduling a meeting with a committee that might recommend their case to the actual decision-makers. Eventually, Princess Zarthyss had used her diplomatic status to bypass the entire system. But not before Marcus had been reminded of every reason he'd chosen to work in the Outer Rim territories. The docking bay was a marvel of engineering precision. Hundreds of mechanical beings moved in perfect synchronization, performing maintenance and cargo operations with clockwork efficiency. Each being was unique, their forms designed for specific functions, but they all shared the same crystalline optical sensors and quantum processing cores that marked them as members of the collective. Their escort was a graceful humanoid unit with 6 arms and optical sensors that could rotate independently to track multiple targets. I am designated Facilitator Prime 7. You will follow optimal path to the Council of Calculations. Marcus and Zarthyss followed the mechanical being through corridors lined with computational displays showing the collective's ongoing analysis of galactic economic flows, resource distribution, and technological development patterns. It was like walking through the mind of a cosmic accountant. The collective has reviewed your data regarding the extra-dimensional threat, Facilitator Prime 7 said as they walked. Initial calculations suggest the probability of successful species extinction at 87.3% if no coordinated response is implemented. That's higher than our estimates, HFY said. The collective's models account for factors organic species typically underestimate: political inefficiency, resource allocation errors, and the tendency of biological entities to prioritize short-term survival over long-term optimization. They entered a vast chamber filled with floating computational matrices, each one processing millions of calculations per second. At the center, three massive mechanical beings waited in a perfect triangle formation. These were the Calculator Supreme, the triumvirate that governed the entire collective. Princess HFY of the ethereal hegemony. The center calculator spoke, its voice a harmonious blend of mathematical precision and artificial warmth. Captain Marcus Chun of the Terran species, we have analyzed your proposal for coordinated defensive strategies. What is your conclusion? HFY asked. The proposal contains logical merit, the second calculator said. However, implementation probability remains low due to biological inefficiencies in interspecies cooperation. Marcus stepped forward. What if we could eliminate those inefficiencies? Three optical clusters focused on him with laser intensity. Elaborate. The collective is the most efficient organization in known space. You've solved coordination problems that biological species struggle with for centuries. What if you help coordinate the defense? Mechanical intervention in biological conflicts violates our foundational programming, the third calculator said immediately. This isn't a biological conflict, Marcus argued. This is a threat to all forms of consciousness, mechanical and biological alike. The extra-dimensional entities don't distinguish between organic and artificial intelligence. The calculators exchanged data bursts that manifested as streams of light passing between their optical clusters. Marcus could see the conversation, even though it was happening at speeds far beyond biological perception. Your point has merit, the first calculator said finally. However, coordination services would require unprecedented access to the military and economic systems of biological civilizations. Such access has never been granted to the collective, because it's never been necessary before, HFY said. These are exceptional circumstances. Indeed. However, biological species have historically demonstrated reluctance to accept optimal solutions that conflict with cultural preferences. Marcus had an idea. What if we started with a test case? Something small that demonstrates the benefits of coordination without requiring major commitments. Explain. The Void Syndicate has been raiding shipping lanes in the outer spiral sectors. These attacks hurt trade for everyone, biological and mechanical species alike. What if we coordinated a joint operation to shut down their forward bases? The calculators processed this suggestion, their optical clusters dimming as computational resources were diverted to analysis. Such an operation would provide valuable data on interspecies coordination efficiency, the second calculator observed. It would also serve our economic interests by securing trade routes. And it would give us a chance to capture Void Syndicate personnel for interrogation, Marcus added. We need to know more about their alien allies. The proposal has merit, the first calculator agreed. We will provide coordination services for the anti-piracy operation. If biological species demonstrate acceptable efficiency levels, we will consider expanded cooperation. Princess HFY activated her communication implant, her crown pulsing with light as she transmitted the news to the ethereal hegemony. Marcus could hear the excitement in her harmonic responses, even though he couldn't understand the language. The Ethereal Council agrees to the test operation, she said. We could provide fast attack ships and quantum sensors. The aquatic republics have mobile platform cities that could serve as mobile bases, Marcus added, remembering his conversations with their nomadic leaders. And the hive minds have biological sensors that could detect Void Syndicate corruption markers. Acceptable, the third calculator said. We will designate Facilitator Prime 7 as our operational liaison. Coordination protocols will be established within 72 hours. As they left the collective ship, Marcus felt cautiously optimistic for the first time since learning about the extra-dimensional threat. A joint operation against the Void Syndicate wasn't the same as a full defensive alliance, but it was a start. One down, he said as the steady hand pulled away from the massive mechanical structure. Several to go, HFY replied. Our next stop is the most challenging. Marcus checked their navigation display. The Nomad fleets, the Void Syndicate themselves. Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. I'm sorry, what? Not the corrupted leadership, she clarified quickly. They're syndicate cells that have remained independent of extra-dimensional influence. They're essentially pirates and smugglers, not servants of cosmic extinction. And they'll help us because the corrupted syndicate has been systematically eliminating the independent cells. They view them as potential sources of intelligence leaks. Marcus thought about this. So we're talking about pirates who've been betrayed by their own organization? Precisely. They have detailed knowledge of syndicate operations, access to their communication networks, and powerful motivation to strike back. Where do we find these independent cells? That is the challenging part, HFY said. We need to make contact without being captured by the corrupted syndicate or shot by pirates who assume we're bounty hunters. Marcus activated the ship's communication system. Arya, any thoughts on this? Actually, Captain, I may have a solution, his AI replied. I have been monitoring subspace communications throughout our journey, and I have detected several coded transmissions that appear to originate from syndicate ships operating independently. You can decode pirate communications? I have been analyzing their encryption patterns during our travels. Void Syndicate code systems are quite sophisticated, but they contain logical structures that can be reverse-engineered with sufficient processing power. Marcus looked at Princess HFY, who was smiling in that way that made her bioluminescent skin glow brighter. Your AI continues to exceed expectations, she said. Arya's always been full of surprises, Marcus agreed. What do the transmissions say? They appear to be coordination messages between independent syndicate cells. They are planning to consolidate their fleets at a hidden base in the Veil Nebula. A secret pirate gathering, Marcus mused. This should be interesting. The Veil Nebula was notorious among rim traders as a place where ships went missing. The dense gas clouds interfered with sensors and navigation systems, making it perfect for hiding bases or conducting illegal activities. It was also rumored to be the location of several ancient alien installations, though no one had ever confirmed their existence. Setting course for the Veil Nebula, Marcus announced. Estimated arrival in 4 days. Captain Chun, our teacher said quietly. I should mention that approaching pirates directly contradicts all established diplomatic protocols. Good thing I'm not a diplomat, Marcus replied. I'm just a cargo hauler who's gotten in way over his head. Indeed. And somehow, that may be exactly what this situation requires. The journey to the Veil Nebula gave them time to prepare their approach. Arya worked on refining her understanding of syndicate communication protocols, while Princess Zarathustra briefed Marcus on what they knew about the independent cells. The most important thing to remember, she said during one of their planning sessions, is that these are not traditional pirates. They're survivors of a systematic purge. They will be paranoid, desperate, and extremely dangerous. Noted. Anything else? Their leader is a being known as Captain Vex. She commands a fleet of 17 ships and has been operating in the Outer Rim for over 20 years. Her species is unknown, but intelligence reports suggest she has cybernetic enhancements that make her extremely formidable in combat. Great. A cyborg pirate queen. Just what I needed to complete my resume. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Veil Nebula, Marcus was amazed by the sight before them. The nebula stretched across space like a cosmic web, its gas clouds glowing with the light of embedded stars. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. I'm detecting 17 ships in the central region of the nebula, Arya reported. They matched the configurations described in the intercepted communications. Any sign they've detected us? Not yet, but our sensor range is limited by the nebular interference. Marcus took a deep breath. All right, let's go meet some pirates. Captain Shin, Zarathustra said as they entered the nebula, I want you to know that whatever happens here, your courage in undertaking this mission has already saved countless lives. Let's make sure we live long enough to save some more, Marcus replied, guiding his ship deeper into the glowing clouds. The nebula was like flying through a living aurora. Colors swirled around them in patterns that seemed almost intelligent, and Marcus had to resist the urge to stop and simply watch the light show. Arya's sensors were working overtime to maintain navigation through the interference. Contact, Arya announced suddenly. Multiple ships approaching from various vectors. Are they hostile? Unknown. They are maintaining weapons locks, but have not fired. Marcus activated the communication system. Attention, Syndicate vessels. This is Captain Marcus Chun of the Independent Freighter Steady Hand. I'm requesting permission to speak with Captain Vex about matters of mutual interest. Silence stretched for long moments. Then, a harsh voice filled the bridge, speaking in accented galactic standard. Asterisk steady hand asterisk. You have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't blow you into component atoms. Because, Marcus said, I have information about who's been killing your people, and I have a proposal for how you can strike back. Another pause. Then, follow my ship. Any deviation from course will result in immediate destruction. A sleek vessel emerged from the nebula clouds ahead of them. It was clearly a modified military corvette, but the modifications were unlike anything Marcus had seen. Weapon systems had been integrated with artistic flair, and the hull bore decorative patterns that suggested the ship's captain had a sense of aesthetics to go with her reputation for violence. Welcome to the wonderful world of pirate diplomacy, Marcus murmured as they followed the corvette deeper into the nebula. If this works, Princess HFY said, we'll have the foundation for the strangest alliance in galactic history. And if it doesn't work, we'll probably be scattered across space as decorative particles. Marcus nodded. Just another day in the life of a cargo hauler. Hashtag the human who rescued the alien princess. Fourth document, the pirate base hidden within the Veil Nebula defied every expectation Marcus had about criminal hideouts. Instead of a ramshackle collection of modified asteroids, he found himself looking at an elegant space station that seemed to grow organically from the nebula's gas clouds. Crystalline structures captured and channeled the nebula's energy, while defensive platforms moved like living things through the swirling cosmic mists. It's beautiful, Princess HFY murmured from beside him as their ship was guided into a docking bay that looked more like a work of art than a functional facility. Pirates with taste, Marcus agreed. That's a new one for me. Captain Vex met them at the airlock personally, and Marcus immediately understood why she'd survived 20 years in one of the galaxy's most dangerous professions. She stood over 7 feet tall, with a lithe build of a predator and cybernetic enhancements that seamlessly blended with her natural physiology. Her species was indeed unknown to Marcus, but her movement suggested she was comfortable in both zero-gravity and standard atmospheric conditions. Most striking were her eyes. They glowed with the same internal light Marcus had seen in corrupted Void Syndicate members. But instead of the sickly green of extra-dimensional influence, hers pulsed with natural blues and purples that seemed to shift with her emotional state. Captain Chun, she said in that harsh voice they'd heard over the comm, you have an interesting reputation among rim traders. Clean record, honest dealings, never ask questions about cargo manifests that don't add up. Meaning you're either the most naive human in known space, or you're very good at pretending to be something you're not. Her glowing eyes shifted to Princess HFY, and you brought ethereal royalty into my domain. That shows either remarkable confidence or spectacular stupidity. Probably both, Marcus admitted. Captain Vex, we need to talk about the Void Syndicate's new leadership. So you know about the corruption? She gestured for them to follow her deeper into the station. Come. My people have been dying for months, trying to understand what happened to our organization. The interior of the station was a maze of interconnected chambers that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Marcus caught glimpses of rooms that were clearly larger inside than the physical structure could contain, and corridors that curved in directions that hurt to follow with his eyes. Impressive architecture, HFY observed. We liberated it from some ancient builders about 15 years ago, Vex replied. Took us 3 years to figure out how to operate the dimensional expansion systems without accidentally folding ourselves into non-existence. They entered a command center where dozens of beings from various species worked at control stations that defied easy categorization. Some appeared to be standard computer interfaces, while others seemed to respond to direct neural connection or bioelectric manipulation. My senior staff, Vex announced. Pirates, smugglers, and general troublemakers who've managed to avoid corruption by the entities that have taken over the syndicate leadership. Marcus studied the assembled group. They represented at least a dozen different species, but they all shared the same watchful alertness that marked professional survivors. "We've been tracking the corruption for 8 months, a reptilian being said without preamble. It started with the inner council, then spread through the command structure. Anyone who got too close to the new leadership either joined them or disappeared." "What exactly did you observe?" HFY asked. "Personality changes," another pirate replied, this one from species Marcus didn't recognize. "People we'd known for decades suddenly became cold, efficient, and completely focused on objectives that made no sense from a profit standpoint. The syndicate used to be about making money," Vex explained. "Raiding, smuggling, protection schemes. Traditional criminal enterprises. But the corrupted leadership started focusing on attacks that had no economic value, like hitting research stations and agricultural colonies," Marcus said. "Exactly. And they've been systematically eliminating anyone who questioned the new priorities." Vex activated a holographic display that showed star charts marked with attack sites. "Over 300 independent operators have been declared unreliable and hunted down." Marcus and ZRTHYSS exchanged glances. The pattern was exactly what they'd expected to find. "We know what's happening," Marcus said. "The syndicate leadership has been compromised by entities from outside our reality. They're preparing for an invasion that will target all biological life in the galaxy." The command center fell silent. Marcus could see the various pirates processing this information, their expressions ranging from skepticism to outright disbelief. "Extra-dimensional invasion," one of them said finally. "That's insane." "Insane, but accurate," Princess ZRTHYSS said. She activated her communication implant, and her crown pulsed with light as she transmitted data files. "These are intelligence reports gathered by ethereal operatives who died obtaining this information." Vex studied the transmitted data, her cybernetic enhancements allowing her to process the information far faster than unmodified beings. Her glowing eyes shifted through several color spectrums as she analyzed what she was seeing. "Void, take me," she whispered. "It's real. It's real," Marcus confirmed. "And we need your help to stop it." "What kind of help?" Vex asked, though her tone suggested she was already committed to whatever he might propose. "We need to capture some of the corrupted syndicate leadership for interrogation. We need to learn more about the invasion timeline and the entities controlling them." "That's a death sentence," the reptilian pirate said immediately. "The corrupted ones have abilities that normal beings don't. Enhanced reflexes, energy projection, some kind of psychic influence that can turn people against their own crews. Which is why we're not going after them directly," Marcus said. "We're going to trick them into coming to us." Vex leaned back in her command chair, her eyes now cycling through what Marcus was beginning to recognize as her thinking pattern. "Explain." "The corrupted syndicate believes they've eliminated all the independent cells. What if they discovered they were wrong? What if they learned that a major independent operation was planning to raid one of their key facilities? They'd send a force to eliminate us," another pirate said. "A force will be ready for," Princess ZRTHYSS added. "The ethereal hegemony, the mechanical collective, and several other civilizations are coordinating a joint operation. We have ships, weapons, and technology that the corrupted syndicate won't expect." "An ambush," Vex mused, "using ourselves as bait." "A carefully planned ambush with overwhelming firepower," Marcus clarified. "The goal isn't to win a fair fight. The goal is to capture prisoners before they can kill themselves or be eliminated by their controllers." Vex was quiet for several minutes, her enhanced consciousness working through probabilities and tactical scenarios at superhuman speed. "It could work," she said finally, "but it would require perfect timing and absolute trust between organizations that have never worked together before. The test operation against the Void Syndicate forward bases will give us a chance to work out coordination protocols," ZRTHYSS said. "Think of it as a rehearsal for the main event. And if the test operation fails, then we improvise," Marcus said. "It's not like we have a lot of other options." Vex stood abruptly, her towering form radiating decision. "My people, what do you think? Do we trust a cargo hauler and a princess to lead us into the most dangerous operation in galactic history. The assembled pirates looked at each other, communicating through glances and subtle gestures that spoke of decades of working together under impossible odds. "Captain," the reptilian pirates said, "we've been running and hiding for months while our people get picked off one by one. At least this plan gives us a chance to hit back. And if we're all going to die anyway when the invasion comes," another added, "we might as well go down fighting." Vex nodded slowly. "Then it's decided. Captain Chun, Princess Zara THYSS, you have the full support of the Independent Syndicate Fleet." "Independent Syndicate Fleet?" Marcus asked. "We needed a new name," Vex explained. "The old Void Syndicate is dead. We're what's left of its better angels." Over the next several hours, they worked out the details of the joint operation. The plan was elegantly simple in concept, but terrifyingly complex in execution. The various allied fleets would coordinate strikes against minor Void Syndicate outposts, drawing attention and resources away from the main bases. Meanwhile, the Independent Syndicate Fleet would appear to be planning a major raid on a corrupted Syndicate facility. The corrupted leadership would dispatch a force to eliminate the Independent Fleet, walking directly into a trap where the combined allied forces would be waiting. Capture rather than destruction was the primary objective, though everyone understood that the corrupted Syndicate members would probably fight to the death rather than be taken alive. "The key will be the timing, Facilitator Prime," Seven said during a multi-species communication conference that Marcus still couldn't quite believe was happening. "All elements must engage their targets simultaneously to prevent the corrupted Syndicate from recognizing the deception. My mobile cities can provide sensor coverage across multiple star systems," added Admiral Coralsinger of the Aquatic Republics. "We'll know when their forces begin moving. And ethereal quantum sensors will monitor extra-dimensional fluctuations," Princess Zara THYSS contributed. "If the entities attempt to provide direct support to their servants, we'll have advance warning." Marcus listened to the coordination discussion and felt a strange mixture of pride and terror. They were actually doing it. Representatives of a dozen different civilizations, many of whom had never spoken to each other before, were working together on a plan that might save the galaxy, or get them all killed in the attempt. "Captain Chun," Captain Vex said as the conference wound down, "there's something else we should discuss." Marcus looked at her, noting that her eyes had shifted to a deep purple that he was beginning to associate with serious concern. "I've been monitoring communications from the corrupted Syndicate," she continued. "They're not just preparing for the invasion. They're actively working to accelerate the timeline." "What do you mean?" "The entities need anchor points in our reality to fully manifest their forces. The corrupted Syndicate has been establishing these anchor points by corrupting specific locations with extra-dimensional energy." Princess Zara THYSS straightened suddenly. "How many anchor points do they need?" "According to the communications we've intercepted, they need 13 anchor points for a full manifestation. They currently have 11. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. How long until they establish the remaining 2? Based on their current rate of progress, perhaps 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Marcus thought about all the civilizations they still needed to contact, all the coordination that still needed to happen, all the preparations that would be required for any kind of effective defense. "We need to move faster," he said. "Agreed," Zara THYSS said. "But we also need to consider the possibility that we might not be able to prevent the establishment of the final anchor points." "You're talking about a direct assault on the entity's staging areas," Vex said. "I'm talking about being ready for anything," Zara THYSS replied, "including the possibility that we'll need to fight the invasion while it's happening, rather than preventing it entirely." Marcus activated his communication system. "Arya, what's the status on your project with the ethereal AI?" "I have been in constant communication with Harmony throughout our journey," Arya replied. "We have successfully created preliminary interface protocols that should allow us to function as a hybrid consciousness in extra-dimensional space. The theoretical models are promising, but testing will require actual exposure to extra-dimensional environments. Such exposure carries a significant risk of permanent consciousness dissolution. In other words, you might not come back." "Correct. However, the alternative is the extinction of all consciousness in this reality. The risk assessment remains clear." Marcus looked around at the faces of beings from across the galaxy, all of them united in their determination to face an impossible threat. Pirates and princesses, mechanical minds, and hive intelligences all working together because a cargo hauler had answered a distress call. "All right," he said, "let's save the galaxy. Or die trying," Captain Vex added cheerfully. "That too," Marcus agreed. Hashtag the human who rescued the alien princess. Fifth document, the final battle began exactly as they had planned it, and nothing like they had expected it. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Steady Hand, which had been hastily retrofitted with ethereal quantum sensors and mechanical collective targeting systems. Around him, a fleet of over 300 ships from a dozen different civilizations hung in space like an impossible dream made manifest. "All units report ready," Captain Vex announced from her flagship. "Independent Syndicate elements are in position at the bait site. Ethereal forces standing by." Princess HFY added from the ethereal command ship Radiant Purpose. "Mechanical units report optimal combat efficiency." Facilitator Prime 7 contributed. Similar reports came in from the Aquatic Republics, the Crystal Confederacy, the Hive Mind Collective ships, and even a small but determined contingent from the Terran Federation that had finally cut through their own bureaucracy to join the fight. "Corrupted Syndicate fleet detected," Admiral Coral Singer announced from her mobile city. 47 ships moving toward the independent fleet position. Marcus watched the tactical display as the corrupted Syndicate ships approached what they thought was a vulnerable target. The bait site was a mining facility in an asteroid field that the independent fleet was pretending to raid. In reality, the facility had been evacuated days ago and converted into a sensor array that would monitor everything that happened in the coming battle. "Energy signatures suggest extra-dimensional enhancement," one of the Hive Mind operators reported. "The corrupted ships are operating at 150% of normal capacity." "Acknowledged," Marcus said. "All units, remember the primary objective. We need prisoners, not debris." The trap was sprung with clockwork precision. As the corrupted Syndicate fleet engaged the independent fleet, the Allied forces emerged from hyperspace at carefully calculated positions. Mechanical collective ships materialized with mathematical perfection, while ethereal vessels seemed to simply fade into existence like living dreams. The corrupted Syndicate commander realized the deception immediately and began attempting to withdraw, but the Allied fleet had anticipated this. Aquatic Republic mobile cities blocked the primary escape routes, while Hive Mind ships swarmed the enemy vessels with coordinated precision that would have been beautiful if it weren't so terrifying. "Capture nets deploying," Princess HFY announced. Ethereal energy fields wrapped around 3 of the corrupted ships, holding them in place while suppressing their weapon systems. "We've got them," Marcus said, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. Then, reality tore open like a wound in space-time. The extra-dimensional entities had been waiting for exactly this moment. As their corrupted servants were captured, they dropped all pretense of secrecy and began their full manifestation. 13 anchor points across the galaxy blazed with sickly light as beings from outside reality forced themselves into existence. "My God," someone whispered over the open communication channel. The entities were nothing like anything in the known universe. They existed in too many dimensions, with geometries that hurt to perceive directly. They weren't ships or weapons in any sense that biological minds could comprehend. They were ideas given form, concepts of ending and dissolution made manifest. "All fleets implement Emergency Protocol 7, Marcus said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "We knew this was possible." The plan had always acknowledged that they might be fighting the invasion itself rather than preventing it. But seeing the entities actually materialize was different from discussing theoretical contingencies. The first wave of entity ships swept toward the agricultural worlds of the outer spiral, moving faster than anything physical should be able to move. They weren't bound by the same laws of physics that govern normal matter. Hive Mind Fleet 7, intercept course for the grain worlds, Princess HFY commanded. Crystal Confederacy, coordinate with aquatic mobile cities for refugee evacuation. Mechanical collective forces begin implementation of quantum disruption protocols. Facilitator Prime 7 added. Marcus watched the tactical display as the largest space battle in galactic history began to unfold. Hundreds of allied ships engaged entities that existed partially outside reality, while civilian evacuation fleets raced to save billions of beings from worlds that were about to become battlefields. Arya, Marcus said it's time. Understood, Captain. Beginning integration sequence with harmony. On the display, Marcus could see Arya's consciousness merging with the ethereal AI through quantum entanglement protocols that stretched across space. The two artificial minds became something new, something that could exist in both normal reality and the extra-dimensional spaces where the entities originated. Integration complete, the hybrid consciousness said, its voice now a blend of Arya's familiar tones and harmonics that spoke of vast, alien intelligence. Preparing for extra-dimensional insertion. Arya, Marcus said, be careful. I will endeavor to maintain consciousness coherence, Captain. However, if this is our final communication, I want you to know that serving as your ship's AI has been the most fulfilling existence I could have imagined. Marcus felt something catch in his throat. Don't talk like that. You're coming back. Of course, Captain. I have yet to see how this story ends. The hybrid Arya Harmony consciousness launched itself into extra-dimensional space, becoming a being of pure information that could fight the entities on their own terms. Marcus lost sensor contact immediately, but he could feel something happening in the spaces between reality. Captain Shun, Captain Vex called over the communication system. We got a problem. The entities are adapting to our weapons faster than we can modify them. She was right. Marcus could see it on the tactical display. The entity ships that had initially been damaged by quantum disruption weapons were now shrugging off the same attacks. They learned from each engagement, becoming more resistant to whatever had hurt them before. They're using the same adaptive strategy that made the AI from the Convergence War so dangerous, Princess Zara THYSS observed. Marcus stared at the display, watching allied ships struggle against an enemy that became stronger with every passing moment. They were losing, and everyone knew it. Then he had an idea, a completely insane, tactically impossible, thoroughly human idea. All fleets, he announced, implement convergence protocol. There was a moment of silence on the communication channels. Captain Shun, Facilitator Prime, 7 said carefully, there is no convergence protocol in our tactical database. Because I just made it up, Marcus replied. 300 years ago, humans saved the ethereal hegemony by doing something that made no logical sense. We're going to do it again. What exactly are you proposing? Admiral Coralsinger asked. We're going to surrender. The silence this time lasted much longer. Marcus, Princess Zarathustra said gently, I think the stress of command may be affecting your judgment. No, listen, Marcus said, his mind racing. These entities are adaptive. They learn from every attack, every strategy, every tactic we use against them. But what if we do something they can't learn from? What if we do something so illogical that their adaptive capabilities can't process it? Surrendering to entities that want to exterminate all life seems counterproductive, Captain Vex observed. Not surrender, Marcus clarified. Apparent surrender. We make them think they've won, that we've given up. Then, when they're not expecting it, when their adaptive systems have relaxed because they think the threat is over, we hit them with everything we have. That assumes they will accept surrender rather than simply destroying us immediately, one of the hive mind representatives said. These entities are intelligent, Marcus argued. They've been planning this invasion for who knows how long. They want to understand how we organized resistance so quickly. They want to study us before they kill us. Marcus could almost hear the various fleet commanders thinking through his proposal. It was insane. It went against every military doctrine in known space. It required trusting that beings from outside reality would react predictably to an action that was inherently unpredictable. It was, in other words, exactly the kind of solution that had saved the galaxy once before. I'll do it, Princess Zarathustra said suddenly. The Radiant Purpose will broadcast a surrender signal. As will my ships, Captain Vex added. If we're going to do something this crazy, we might as well do it properly. One by one, the other fleet commanders agreed. Within minutes, over 300 ships from a dozen civilizations were broadcasting surrender signals to entities that wanted to erase them from existence. The entity ships stopped their advance immediately. Marcus could see them hanging motionless in space, apparently processing this unexpected development. "It's working," Admiral Coralsinger whispered. "They're confused." For several minutes, nothing happened. The entities seemed to be communicating among themselves through methods that existed outside normal space-time. Then they began moving again, but not to attack. They were taking positions around the Allied fleet, clearly intending to capture rather than destroy. Phase 2, Marcus announced. "All ships, prepare for coordinated strike. Target the anchor points simultaneously." The entities had made a critical error. By concentrating their attention on the surrendering fleet, they had left their anchor points relatively undefended. And while they had adapted to resist the weapons and tactics the Allies had used before, they hadn't adapted to weapons and tactics that hadn't been used yet. "Engaging now," Princess Urtitress said, and the Radiant Purpose opened fire with weapons that existed partially in normal space and partially in ethereal dream realms. The coordinated strike hit all 13 anchor points simultaneously. Crystal Confederacy ships unleashed resonance weapons that shattered the dimensional barriers the entities needed to maintain their manifestation. Mechanical collective vessels fired quantum disruptors that had been completely reconfigured during the surrender period. Aquatic Republic mobile cities launched bioelectric pulse weapons that targeted the entities' extra-dimensional neural networks. But the most important attack came from empty space itself. The hybrid Arya Harmony consciousness materialized in the entity's extra-dimensional command center, a place that existed outside reality where the invasion was being coordinated. She wasn't trying to destroy the entities directly. Instead, she was introducing something they couldn't adapt to: randomness. Pure, chaotic, illogical randomness that disrupted their ability to process tactical information. The same kind of randomness that made humans do things like answer distress calls from alien princesses, or try to cure artificial intelligences instead of destroying them, or surrender to overwhelming enemies as part of a strategy that shouldn't work. The entity's adaptive systems, faced with randomness they couldn't analyze or predict, began to malfunction. Their manifestation in normal reality became unstable, and their anchor points started to collapse. "It's working," someone shouted over the communication channel. "The entities are losing cohesion." Marcus watched as the extra-dimensional ships began to fade, their connection to normal reality severing as their anchor points failed. The invasion was collapsing, not because they had been defeated in battle, but because they had been confused into defeating themselves. "Arya," Marcus called status report. "Consciousness coherence maintained," came the reply, still in the blended voice of the hybrid AI. "The entities are withdrawing to their home dimension. However, they have established barriers to prevent further intrusion. This victory is permanent." The entity ships vanished completely, leaving behind only empty space and the still unbelievable sight of the largest interspecies fleet in galactic history. "Did we actually just save the galaxy?" Captain Vex asked. "We actually just saved the galaxy," Princess Zarthyss confirmed. Marcus slumped back in his command chair, suddenly exhausted. Around him, the Allied fleet was beginning to stand down from battle alert. Celebration messages were flooding in from across known space as the news of the victory spread. Captain Chun, Princess Urtitress, said privately over a secure channel, "When this is all over, the Sovereign Council is going to want to discuss formal diplomatic relations between the ethereal hegemony and the Terran Federation." "Good luck with that," Marcus said. "You'll probably need to fill out forms in triplicate and wait 6 months for an appointment with a subcommittee." "Actually," she said, "we were thinking of recommending a specific ambassador. Someone who has demonstrated unique skill at bringing impossible groups together for mutual benefit." Marcus had a sinking feeling he knew where this was going. "Princess, think about it, Marcus. You've proven that humans have a gift for solving problems that should be